Hello, you're listening to Politics Uncensored with me, Zoe Grunewald.
And me, Ali Milani.
Coming up on today's show, literally anything could happen. Labour's Keir Starmer faces the biggest challenge to his leadership yet. We will bring you everything as it breaks, if it breaks, when it breaks. Just stay with us.
What do you know?
I don't know anything, Ali. I'm keeping my cards close to my chest. Then 5 countries boycotted this year's edition of the Eurovision Song Contest over Israel's participation. Can the competition ever be free from politics?
As always, you can find us at Politics Uncensored UK on social media. But first, it's the Week Unwrapped.
US President Donald Trump is on a rare visit to China this week to meet with Premier Xi Jinping. The summit aims to ease the fragile relationship between the two superpowers. In a televised address, Trump hailed the Chinese president's great leadership and told Xi it was an honour to be his friend. Ali, I mean, we've turned our attention away from global events this week because there's been so much going on domestically. But this is significant. Donald Trump, who has been famously extremely hostile to China, now standing there, hailing Xi Jinping's great leadership, calling the US and China friends. What do you make of this?
Yeah, it's pretty strange given that it's been a kind of defining mark of Donald Trump, his anti-China messaging. And his ever since he was he was a Democrat at one point, but ever since he was an aspiring Republican candidate, and everything from his trade war to his messaging around the Chinese leadership has been pretty fervent. But as we've come to expect from Donald Trump, or DT, as I'm going to call him from now, he does bounce back and forth. He does like a strong man. And he kind of defies traditional sort of American allies and foes. And he has been very positive about Xi Jinping and about Chinese leadership as well. What I thought was particularly striking, I saw him do an interview where he was asked about Taiwan, because Taiwan is the main sticking point between China and America. And it's the area that actually is probably the highest risk, not just for the two countries, but for global affairs more broadly. And he kind of dismissed it and said it wasn't even raised. It's not even a question that's come up, which I think is pretty strange because it's probably the number one thing that an American president and a Chinese leader you'd expect to talk about. But that's not the case. And so in many ways, Donald Trump has, in his first tenure and in his second, redefined American relationships with allies and foes. And we know that he has a propensity for strong men, even if they're not democratic or have an amazing human rights record, and I think that's reflected here, right?
Yeah, I mean, he probably sees an amazing human rights record as kind of by the by, you know?
Yeah.
Nice to have, but you can roll without it.
Yeah, as long as you're strong and you get shit done, right?
What does this mean for Taiwan? I mean, there has been increasing tensions, obviously, between China and Taiwan over the past few years. China has come out pretty aggressively about how it sees Taiwan's place in the world. I mean, what do you make of what this could mean for the future of Taiwan?
It's hugely important. For listeners who may not know, Taiwan is an independent country that America and the UK recognizes. China maintains and always has maintained that it's Chinese territory. And it's therefore been a sort of sticking point in an area of great tension for a very, very long time. Taiwan has always had the absolute American military guarantee that if China was to invade or to try and bring it back under Chinese control, that there was an American backstop, if you will, of protection. If you're Taiwan, you're certainly nervous because if it's not even coming up with meetings with Xi Jinping, and Donald Trump looks more favorably and getting closer to the Chinese leadership, and he's talking about them being great leaders and China as his great friend. You start to probably doubt whether that American backstop still exists, whether that American military guarantee still exists, as Europeans do, right? That's been sort of defining measure for all of us as to whether the American security guarantee and its military alliances that has fared so well for us for so long will continue in the near future. And Donald Trump has really brought a lot of that into question.
Yeah, we know Donald Trump is certainly not above using geopolitics, particularly, you know, who owns what piece of land, as bargaining chips for his economic desires. We've seen that in how he talks about Greenland, for example. We've seen that definitely in the Middle East, particularly Palestine, when he was talking about setting it up as a kind of real estate hub. Donald Trump sees everything as a business opportunity and doesn't really care about precedent or what it is people want from American security, which often, as you say, is that backstop. We should say that obviously Donald Trump may be very fond and friendly with Xi Jinping now, but as soon as he leaves, it could be a whole other story.
All it takes with Donald Trump is one bad moment and you're gone, right?
Do you think cuddling up to Xi Jinping will do him any favors in Iran?
Look, Iran and China are certainly allies, and no question this will have come up in the meeting. I find it hard to believe Taiwan didn't come up, to be honest, but no doubt Iran would have come up in the meeting. So it's certainly something China will be talking about, not least because we've spoken about the Strait of Hormuz so much on this show, but a significant amount of the oil that comes out of the Strait of Hormuz goes to China, the oil and gas. And so it's in China's interest for this war to end and the Strait of Hormuz to be reopened. And there's no question that will have come up, and it will have been a significant talking point, specifically as Iran and America have been trading deals to end the war permanently. Do you want to ask you one question? Do you know who else was on this trip?
Tell me.
Elon Musk.
Elon Musk and Apple's Tim Cook.
Talk about tech, right?
Yeah, Citigroup's Jane Fraser. It's a whole raft of corporate leaders. If you wanted to know what was motivating this trip for Donald Trump.
Yeah, but we spoke, how we spoke about things can move on a dime with Donald Trump. The Elon Musk relationship is a really, really good example. I'm old enough to remember when Elon Musk was tweeting about Trump's Epstein file involvement, right? And the implications therein, and now suddenly they're mates again.
Well, you know what, Ali? Money talks. And it means more than any kind of loyalties to these men. So let's move on. Speaking of money and men and their interests, this is a story we touched on last week. I think this is pretty explosive. So last week, you may remember, we talked about Farage having received a £5 million donation that he didn't declare to the Parliamentary Standards Commissioner. This was from a Thailand-based crypto billionaire called Christopher Harborne. Farage essentially got the £5 million donation, and then in the weeks that followed, decided to stand as an MP. Now, he obviously denies the two are linked, and we should say he denies wrongdoing. The rules are pretty clear that if such a gift is received, it should be declared to the Parliamentary Standards Authority, but Farage didn't declare it because he said it was a personal gift. He said it was a donation that he had received because there were concerns about his security. It has now transpired that Nigel Farage bought a £1.4 million property in cash shortly after he received the £5 million personal gift from Harborne. Now, this rather undermines Nigel Farage's claim that this £5 million donation was to fund his personal security. Unless this house came complete with a moat, a drawbridge, a high-tech security system, round-the-clock security guards, a panic room.
Do you know that it didn't?
I don't know that, to be fair.
Well, then you're just part of the liberal media.
Yeah, okay, I'm part of... you're right.
I have so many questions.
Go on.
Some of which include why have I never been offered £5 million for my personal security? But we're going to move on.
Well,
past those.
Okay, so I can tell you why, Ali, actually,
Okay.
because Farage has now given an interview to The Sun's Harry Cole. He said, this was given to me on an unconditional basis, completely unconditional basis, but frankly, it was given as a reward for campaigning for Brexit for 27 years. Now, if something was given as a reward, it can't be unconditional because the very nature of you being rewarded something means you had to do something in order to get that reward. So there were conditions attached to it.
Which clashes with that word unconditional.
Yes, and the whole point of having to declare this was that it can't be political in nature. It has to be personal or it had to be a commercial loan. If he got it because of a reward he did for something that was highly political, i.e. campaigning for Brexit, well... he should have declared it then, shouldn't he?
Well, I have this question. Even if we get over the fact that he clearly doesn't know what the word unconditional means, if it was a reward for his political campaign and electoral campaigning, surely the Electoral Commission should know.
Absolutely,
no?
He should have declared it, and the rules are pretty they're pretty firm about that. You have to register all your current financial interest and any registrable benefits received in the 12 months before your election within 1 month of their election. The rules say purely personal gifts or benefits from family or commercial loans would not have to be registered. I think there is very little doubt here now that this was a purely personal loan.
Well,
Farage is just a purely personal gift.
Yeah.
Farage has just said it was a reward for campaigning for Brexit for 27 years.
Yeah, so look, the key question I have is, well, I was going to ask why he has to, just from a rules perspective, he got this before he was an MP, right? Now, I'm not saying this happened, but it smelt, when the story came out to me, it smelt like someone encouraging him to run for office and saying, this is a financial, again, backstop, is the term we're using in today's show. It's a sort of financial backstop for go ahead, right? Which then you should absolutely have to declare because it's part of the game, right? Now, Farage is denying that clearly, and he's saying it's part of a reward for him campaigning for Brexit. Why does this man need so much money? So we're talking about how many versions of this story have we covered? A £5 million gift that we now know about, nearly £1 million deal we did with that gold company, all those videos, cameo videos he made. GB News. I
agree. What do you need all this money
for? Why
for?
does he need so much money? Is he in a lot of debt? Does he just love money? And that's a personal question, but the political question is, how many people does he owe favors to? How many people think they have significant influence over that man for deals and money and gifts and involvements, all this kind of stuff? If Labour wasn't in absolute crisis, this should be a national story and questions that journalists should be digging up now. I
mean, I don't want to be too optimistic about this story. So Farage is now to be investigated by the Common Standards Watchdog. I think he's dug himself into a right hole with the interview he just gave with Helen Cole, right? If the investigation finds that Farage committed a particularly serious breach of parliamentary declaration rules, he could be suspended from the Commons. And we know a suspension of 10 days or more could trigger a recall petition, potentially forcing him to fight for his seat again in Clacton. Now, he may well win his seat. He may, again, if he needed to, he may well turn this into a big anti-establishment, they're all out to get me, it's a bit of money, I'm the most personally attacked MP in Britain, that's why I needed this money for my safety and security. What's wrong with, being somebody who cares about money? We should all be like that. The usual Farage points of order. But ultimately, you're right, Ali, something about this stinks. Why didn't he just declare the money?
Yeah. I mean, that's question number 2 for me. Why is a crypto billionaire giving him £5 million?
Exactly.
And what does
and if it's all innocent, why not just declare it? I think Farage doesn't want, if this turns into an investigation and a suspension and a by-election, there's going to be a hell of a lot of questions.
I sometimes think in politics there's too much over-analysis, and not to sound like a Republican, but sometimes common sense in politics is a good thing, and so I think 99% of well-meaning, honest, not partisan listeners would happily accept that a crypto billionaire does not give a politician £5 million without expecting something in return.
We're going to quickly move on because we've got to go to a break soon, but I just wanted to get this last story in. So over the weekend, French President Emmanuel Macron angrily interrupted a speech at an event in Kenya to demand silence from the audience. He walked up to the stage while the people were speaking. He appeared visibly upset about the level of the noise in the room. He took the microphone away from the speaker, and this happened.
Excuse me, everybody. Hey. I'm sorry, guys, but it's impossible to speak about culture, to have people like that super inspired coming here, making a speech with such a noise. So this is a total lack of respect.
It's the most French thing I've ever heard in my life.
It was. I have to say, it's giving teacher vibes massively. It sounds like, excuse me, this person's come in to tell you about road safety, and you're all talking over him.
Yes. What does this represent about this school? It was a bit awkward to talk about. What was he talking about? Culture there. We can't talk about culture.
So the summit was meant to show off France's new policy for the continent and improve relations in a shift from a dominating former colonial power to what Paris describes as an equal partnership.
So can I just say that the aim was to to not look like a dominant former
Yes.
colonial power, and so the president of France thought it was right to jump on stage and very angrily tell people to shut up.
And take the microphone off the speaker to tell people to shut up.
No,
Emmanuel.
Mr. Macron.
Yeah, I mean, he faced a little bit of backlash for this, but I just feel like Macron, you can criticise him a lot, but genuinely, he's one of the more decent leaders we have going on in the world right now.
I mean, it would bother me, by the way.
It would,
Yeah,
if he grabbed the microphone off you.
I'm trying to listen to a speech and people are like...
Oh, you mean if
yapping
people
on
were
because-
yapping?
yeah.
Yeah, so maybe he did have a point. It was rude.
I mean, he might have a point, but he's still Macron, isn't it?
It's still Macron. The Macron we know and love. Okay, that is it for the Week Unwrapped. After the break, we're going to delve into another crazy week in Westminster. Stay tuned. Welcome back. You're listening to Politics Uncensored with me, Zoe Grunewald.
And me, Ali Milani.
And we have got some breaking news for you. I told you this show
How
was
did you
gonna
know?
be. I just had a feeling.
How did you know?
So, Andy Burnham, the soft left contender who is waiting in the wings for Keir Starmer to step aside, but had the insurmountable hurdle of not actually having a seat. It has now been announced that Josh Simmons, you may remember him, not the man you think would stand aside for Andy Burnham, I have to say. He is going to stand aside. He is stepping down so that, in his words, Andy Burnham can return home, fight to re-enter Parliament, and if elected, drive the change our country is crying out for. Now, we should say this doesn't mean that Andy Burnham automatically has a seat. There will have to be a by-election. He will have to fight for this seat in Wigan. But the hurdle of Andy Burnham not being able to find somewhere to stand, that has been cleared. Ali, where does this leave Keir Starmer?
So, where we are as we speak, we have had speculation about Keir Starmer's position for a very, very long time. Wes Streeting was expected to resign today and announce a leadership bid. That didn't happen. He did resign, but he didn't announce a leadership bid. And interestingly enough, in Wes Streeting's resignation letter, he spoke about how there needs to be a broad list of candidates and a battle of ideas, not petty factionalism, which has been some of the risks. Keir Starmer, throughout this process, has insisted he will fight on and he will battle on. And so really, there have been three key names that have been raised throughout this process. One was Wes Streeting, who everybody knows wants to be Prime Minister and has been working on this in the wings for a very, very long time. The second has been Andy Burnham, who is the most popular Labour politician in the country, but has had the significant barrier of not being an MP, which you're required to be to become Prime Minister. And the third was Angela Rayner, who up until this morning has had the tax affairs over her head about whether she paid the appropriate tax for a flat that she bought, which has now been cleared. She said she has been exonerated for. So Wes Streeting resigned and didn't mount a leadership bid. Angela Rayner also announced that she wasn't challenging Keir Starmer directly, and so that only left Andy Burnham. Now, the problem Andy Burnham had was the seat, and that seems to have been ticked off now. At least we go to a by-election if the NEC approve him. Now, remember last time they blocked him.
Yes. What is your read on that? Will the NEC block him again?
I don't believe so. I think the NEC would have to be utterly mad. I'm trying not to use... I'm trying to be somewhat reasonable in my language. I think if the NEC blocks Andy Burnham this time, I think they have cast Labour into electoral political oblivion. It's over. The game's up. The jig is up. So
Angela Rayner this morning announced she'd been cleared by HMRC for the ongoing tax investigation. Now, you might remember this was an investigation into her tax affairs. It was to do with whether she was paying, I think, the right amount of council tax on one of her properties and the arrangement she had there. Is that correct? Was it about council tax? Was it
stamp duty?
It was about okay. So Angela Rayner had been cleared of deliberate wrongdoing over £40,000 of unpaid tax. She announced on Thursday that HM Revenue and Customs did not find her over the affair. It was relating to a purchase of a property.
Yeah, and I think what's critical about what she said this morning as well was not only had she been found that she'd paid the appropriate level of tax, but she hadn't actively tried to not pay the right amount.
But you know, we already knew that. Laurie Magnus, the Standards Commissioner, had already made that judgment call. And it was quite clear from anyone looking at Angela Rayner's affairs that what she had done wasn't deliberate. She had gotten the wrong advice from her lawyers. So, this was all a little bit wrought out. But as you say, Angela Rayner wasn't planning to go for the leadership position anyway. However, there was a bit of kite flying about Angela Rayner last night because there was a feeling that if Wes was to throw his hat in the ring and launch a leadership coup, with Andy Burnham not being in place in Parliament, it could have been a straight shot for Wes Streeting.
Correct.
Therefore, you needed a stop Wes candidate. Correct. And that was said to be Rayner or Ed Miliband.
Ed Miliband was an option as well.
Yes.
Yeah. And there were rumours that he had the 81 seats as well, if necessary, as a stop Wes candidate. But look, I think ultimately, funnily enough, I think the party's reached the right position here. I was really impressed with Wes's statement because, look, do I think he reached it for the right reasons? I don't know, right? I think Wes probably saw the polling numbers, saw that he would lose in a one-on-one election with Keir Starmer, and therefore didn't fancy that because I think that would be, from a political career side, like it would be disastrous for him. But the reality is, no matter what you think of Andy Burnham, if he's blocked out of the process, you've doomed your next prime minister because the next time there's even the slight hiccup in government, they're constantly going to get asked questions about this guy who's apparently really popular up in Manchester that they blocked from running in the seat. So the only way you actually get through this is you have to actually make it an open contest and allow Andy Burnham to stand, and then whoever wins, wins, and that's the only chance that you've got to come out of this looking clean. Because, everybody knows I think Andy Burnham is the right choice here. But even if I didn't, I don't want to be the prime minister. I have no authority and no chance of success if I'm only in office because of some skullduggery that was done behind the scenes to stop someone who everybody knows is more popular than me or thinks is more popular than me.
I want to talk about I want to just rewind slightly and go back to Wes Streeting and his resignation statement. Everybody thought Wes was keen to go now because it would essentially have been a coronation for him. It felt like, though, he'd massively overestimated maybe the numbers that he thought he could get. Obviously, he need 81 MPs to back him to trigger a leadership putsch. And there was a real suggestion last night that he just didn't have the numbers. What he's actually said instead, and he basically said this in his resignation statement, was that he was resigning, he wanted a timetable, he wanted a clear process with several candidates.
I will say, I have it on good authority. I think he did have the numbers.
He did have the numbers.
I think Wes Streeting did have the 81 that's necessary to challenge Keir Starmer. I think what he didn't want was a leadership contest between himself and Keir Starmer because the polling suggests he loses that. Not only loses that, loses it by 30 points. Right, so it's not even a close contest. But from what I understand, my limited sources in Parliament, he had the 81.
Okay, interesting. I want to talk about what Starmer does now.
Yeah.
Because he has been defiant. I have heard that he has got Morgan McSweeney back in number 10.
You're joking.
Doing his ring rounds.
Is he actually? You're joking.
Which,
no chance, right?
Keir, come on. I'm actually starting to feel quite sorry for him.
Yes.
Bringing back Morgan McSweeney, I mean, it really is the last gasp of dying.
You really don't have any more friends,
No, it is giving like nobody else wants to sit next to him.
Do you think there's any chance he calls Pete back?
Pete, why not bring Mandelson back as well? Bring the whole gang.
Yeah.
But clearly...
Although, I did hear, I think Ian Dale said this on his show, that he's getting a lot of calls of people who feel sorry for Keir at this point.
I actually think so. I was going to come on to this, but let's talk about Keir first, and then let's talk more broadly about what this kind of says about politics.
Yeah, that's good.
So, Keir Starmer, obviously unpopular. It was just last week. The local elections were a bloodbath. I mean, the fact is, we've not even reflected on them on this show because things have moved so quickly.
Yeah.
But obviously, it goes without saying, they were terrible. It was basically a total wipeout for Labour.
Worst ever.
Reform made, thousands of new seats. And what was coming up a lot on the doorstep was disdain, dislike, but also a lot of people saying they feel sorry for him. But the conclusion was that it's still not a good thing for a prime minister to have people who feel sorry for you. You need to have authority, and people are feeling sorry for you because... Whether you think Keir Starmer's doing a good job or not, you can't argue with the fact that he hasn't been in control of his party. He hasn't brought people along with him. You might think genuinely, actually, there's quite a lot of things that Keir Starmer can talk about. He can talk about breakfast clubs. He can talk about railway renationalisation. He can talk about the Renters' Rights Bill, workers' reforms. But the problem is he hasn't convinced anyone of that, seemingly his own self. And his speech on Monday, where he essentially doubled down and said, we're going to do more of the same, I think that was the nail in the coffin. Right?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things I think to say there. One is, for me, I cannot see a scenario in which Keir Starmer survives. You just don't survive this. You don't have the authority of the party, therefore you don't have the authority of Parliament. He's had nearly 100 MPs publicly call for him to go. We know there's a lot more than that privately in the PLP. His ministers have resigned. His cabinet ministers have resigned. He's desperately unpopular. He's just been absolutely wiped out in the local election results. He's done, right? The only person that seems not to know he's done is Keir Starmer himself. And just finding out that, allegations, alleged, I don't know if I have to say allegedly, but Morgan McSweeney has been pulled back in is the death nail on the death nail, right? You don't want people to be feeling sorry for you, because then you've really got no authority to drive legislation, etc., etc. And a lot of this is of his own making. No one made him appoint Peter Mandelson. No one made him U-turn on or make the initial decision on winter fuel allowance or the two-child benefit cap, and then withdraw the whip from MPs who defied that, and then U-turn on it later on. These are a lot of decisions and mistakes that he's made on his own. On his own terms. But ultimately, I think Keir Starmer was not fit for this job. He is one of the worst communicators I've ever seen in British politics. And so he was never going to make a success of this, I don't think. And what the option in front of him now, and you know what's funny? Catherine West, who has made a name for herself over the last week, allegedly, it's been reported that she responded to Steve Reid in a WhatsApp group. And when Steve Reid pushed back on whether the Prime Minister should go, and she said, listen, Steve, this is either going to be an orderly exit or a disorderly exit. I think that is really the only decision that's ahead of Keir Starmer. Does he want to leave with some dignity, set a date, make sure that the party
like
has
Blair
an appropriate...
did.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And leave, looking back on some positive legislation, like the breakfast clubs, renters reform bill that you said, keeping us out of the war in Iran, for example, and then leave with some dignity. And then you can say, I'm one of like 3 or 4 people that's ever won an election for the Labour Party. Or do you want to cling on and essentially be pulled out of office?
Dragged kicking and screaming. A la Boris Johnson and Liz Truss.
Yeah.
Having said that, there is a problem, isn't there? Because Keir Starmer is going to be the 5th Prime Minister in a decade in the UK. So if we look back through history, Margaret Thatcher served 11 years in government. John Major, 6 years. Tony Blair, 10 years. David Cameron, 6 years. And then, sort of post-Brexit, things start getting very wobbly. So you have Theresa May, 3 years. Boris Johnson, 3 years, 44 days. Liz Truss, remember her? 49 days. Obviously, that one was particularly short. Rishi Sunak, 1 year, 254 days. Keir Starmer, 1 year, 311 days so far. As much as you can understand the calls for Keir Starmer to stand down, you can absolutely point to the things he's done wrong. This doesn't read to me like a healthy democracy. And in fact, this isn't... It's very easy for us to talk about the politics of this and to get caught up in the rumour mill and, the personalities and the backstabbing. But what happens when we have this level of instability is the UK economy takes a hit. Voters take the hit. Not only do they have plummeting trust in the institution, any long-term legislation, there's just no chance of getting it through. The bond markets panic. The cost of borrowing goes up. Interest rates go up. Nobody wants to invest in the UK because it looks like a basket case. I mean, I'm not saying... I don't know what I'm saying. Am I saying we should give Keir Starmer more time?
No, I think you're saying this. Let me assume what you're saying.
Yes.
I think you're saying this just isn't healthy.
No, it's not working.
Right?
Something's not working.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's just Keir Starmer.
No.
Is what I'm saying.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
Right? Look, I think Keir Starmer should go. I think he should. I've thought he should go for a very, very long time. And I'll go out on a limb and just say, you know what? I just don't like the dude. Right? But you're absolutely right that this just cannot be healthy for a country. To go through this many prime ministers that quickly, whether it's for the economy, our relationship, all that kind of stuff, right? But the truth is, I think the diagnosis here, I've been saying this for a long time, and I actually caught a bit of heat for this not long ago from some colleagues that I have in Parliament. I think the crisis here is the quality of politicians that exist in this country. Like, if I go through this list, objectively, Boris Johnson, Liz Truss, Rishi Sunak, Keir Starmer, we're not talking, these aren't whatever you think of them. They're not Wilsons and Thatchers and Blairs or like Obamas. Do you know what I mean? I just don't think this is very high. I think there's a problem with the quality of public servants we have in Westminster.
I'm also going to throw in, I think I agree with you to an extent, but I think it's possibly more structural. I think first past the post. Our electoral system is meant to give us strong, stable governments. But as the political landscape fractures, as we stop just going for one party, we become more polarised. There's many reasons why people's voting preferences and their political acclamations are evolving and changing. First past the post is essentially bursting at the seams. It cannot produce a healthy democracy because people are much more split and fractured than they used to be. And I think we need a electoral system that represents that and holds it in place, because ultimately what you have is you have people across the country, they have to vote tactically, often their vote doesn't matter, and essentially everybody knows you're kind of voting for who's going to be Prime Minister. There is so much then pressure on that governing party. If we had a political system and an electoral system that encouraged politicians to work by consensus, proportional representation, yes, of course, PR, I'm not saying it produces necessarily stable administrations. We've seen that it doesn't. But I think the only thing that first past the post had over PR was that it produced strong governments that could get things done in 5-year terms. Clearly, the system isn't holding anymore.
No, and I think you're right. Actually, that's probably a better diagnosis than my
I think you're right as well. I think you're right as well, but I think there's actually a deep sickness in our democracy here. And I think people are blaming one man, one governing party, and actually it encourages parties like Reform and the Tories to constantly be getting in the way, not doing things by consensus, because everybody's thinking about the next election. Do you see what I mean? Whereas if we had a parliamentary system that said all of these parties have a degree of power, work together on things, we'd get shit done, and this country needs to get shit done. We haven't built anything substantial in decades.
But we also, it's not just that we've replaced these prime ministers, but how many elections we've had.
How many elections we've had. It's just not healthy, and it feeds that treasury short-termism as well, where HS2, it's a perfect example where the treasury is just thinking, oh well, if we spend this money, how will it look when we try and balance the books at the next election? They're not thinking long-term because they know it's so unstable. So that's my rant.
No prime minister can reasonably, no matter what you think of them, come into office now looking at what's happened over the last sort of 10 years and go, I'm going to make decisions that will benefit us in 10 years' time, because you don't know if you're going to be in office in 10 days' time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Do you want to just say one more thing?
Go on.
Larry has seen another prime minister.
Larry's seen off another prime minister.
Respect Larry.
I don't love Larry.
Whoa.
He hissed at me.
He's absolutely right to hiss at you, it turns out. Let's go to break, because they're about to descend in here.
Okay, we're going to go to a break. We'll hash this out off air and we'll come back. And when we come back, we're going to be talking about Eurovision. Stay tuned. Welcome back. You're listening to Politics Uncensored with me, Zoe Grunewald.
And me, Ali Milani.
Now, Ali, have you heard this song yet?
If only there was a language that I could count in that would make me feel better. Oh yeah, oh yeah. Eyes fight, try, darling, I need something someday. Eyes fight, try, with a slice of pepperoni. I bet you can own me. That'll be a pony.
That was Look Mum, No Computer with Eins, Zwei, Drei, the UK's Eurovision entry for this year. What do you think?
I loved it.
I thought it was great.
I hadn't heard that before, but I was on the edge of my seat. And I look very much forward to... Oh, wait, no, am I boycotting? Are Israel in it this year?
Well, we're going to find out.
Right,
but you're slightly skipping ahead. I just asked you if you liked the song.
I love the song.
Okay, good. It's the grand final of the competition, now in its 70th year, and it's being held in Vienna on Saturday night, and hundreds of millions of people will be tuning in. I always forget that Eurovision clashes roughly with my birthday.
Does it happen every year?
It's pretty much around my birthday every year, so I always forget that. But anyway, this is by the by. I always forget, and then it comes up, and I remember, that's of course Eurovision. However, this year's edition is shrouded in controversy as disputes over Israel's participation and accusations of political double standards threaten to overshadow the music. Here to tell us more is Chris West, author of Eurovision, A History of Modern Europe Through the World's Greatest Song Contest. Chris, thank you so much for joining us.
Hello, nice to be here.
Just talk to us a little bit about why the competition is particularly tense this year.
Well, it's been tense since 2024, when there were a lot of protests. Well, obviously after the Israeli response to the ghastly terrorist attack of 7th of October 2023, they piled into Gaza, and people were beginning to say this is an overreaction, and people started protesting about it. Participants in the contest tried to protest about it, and the whole thing got completely out of hand. The organisers lost control. A young Dutch singer was sent home for absolutely no reason at all. He sort of waved his hand at somebody and they thought that was a threatening gesture, and the whole thing sort of became pretty anarchic. And what was happening was that Israel were using the contest as a kind of soft power vehicle. They were sending out loads of online adverts to get people to vote for them, and this sort of the whole thing went bonkers, basically.
Chris, can I ask you, what is the history of the politics of Eurovision? Is there? I know we talk about Russia. We will talk about Russia, but does the contest have a long history of either boycotts or people being banned for political reasons, or is this fairly a new phenomenon?
I think it's a new phenomenon, but of course Eurovision has always been political. It started off back in the 1950s as a reaction to the horrors of the Second World War and a sense of we must never do this again in Europe. And various people were leading lights in bringing together what has now become the European Union. And the father of all this was a man called Jean Monnet, and one of his great friends was a guy called Marcel Bezençon. And Marcel Bezençon had this idea, why don't we have a Europe-wide singing competition that will bring us together? And so they did in 1956. And the 7 countries participating were basically the 6 countries of the original European Economic Community, plus Switzerland. And they said, well, we'll see how it goes. And if it works well, we might do another one. And here we are still. So it's always had a political aspect to it.
And can you talk to us about why Israel is in Eurovision? I mean, obviously, it sounds when you say Eurovision like it would be Europe. Is there what is the particular reason that you have Israel in there?
Many years ago, a group of bureaucrats carved up the globe into various sections, and one section was called the European Broadcasting Area. And I can't remember the exact lines that were drawn, but basically North Africa was part of it, Israel was part of it. It's a purely bureaucratic thing. If you were in the European Broadcasting Area, you were allowed to join a thing called the European Broadcasting Union. This is the EBU, who run Eurovision. So Israel are in there because they've got a perfect right to be in there.
Okay, so the main criticism that I can see is the accusations of hypocrisy, that they have banned Russia from participating following the invasion of Ukraine and everything associated with that, but have not yet banned Israel for they're being investigated by the ICC for war crimes in Gaza. So I guess what some people might say is you understand the point of this should be apolitical, but that goes out the window. Like with FIFA, for example, once you ban one country for politics, then you've opened the Pandora's box of politics, right? So what is the reasoning they have given as to why no to Russia but yes to Israel?
It was quite complicated. And I answer, I don't fully understand it, but there are sort of differences. I think Russia was actually thrown out of the European Broadcasting Union, which meant that it wasn't allowed in anything organised by the EBU, whereas Israel is still part of the EBU. So I think that's the main difference. But I guess I see for a lot of people would say...
Just chuck them out of the EBU, yeah. That's what people would say, right? They should just get chucked out of the EBU as well. Have we lost Chris, or is he outraged at my question?
I think we might have lost Chris.
Yeah, he seems to have.
We'll see if he comes back. But
this isn't.
Until he comes back, let's talk about this because it's 5 countries: the Republic of Ireland, the Netherlands, Slovenia, Spain, and Iceland. They're all boycotting this year because of Israel. Chris is back, so we can ask him this.
Chris is back.
Chris, have we had any sense of?
I'm back.
Hello. Thank you for joining us again.
Hello.
Obviously, this, as you said, started last year. Talk to us a little bit about what's going on this year. We've got the Republic of Ireland, the Netherlands, Slovenia, Spain, and Iceland all boycotting this year. Does that mean they are not going to attend at all? They're not putting forward any performers? What does the boycott?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay. They're not putting forward any performers.
And what will this do to the competition? We've got 5 countries heading to Vienna. It's the 70th edition of the Eurovision Song Contest, so it's presumably a particularly big and celebratory one. Without those countries, are they going to really feel the loss of them?
I think there'll be a slightly muted atmosphere. A lot of people are unhappy with Israel's continuing participation, and those countries will be missed. But on the other hand, there are still 33 countries participating. We had a very enjoyable semi-final on Tuesday. We've got another one coming up this evening. So Eurovision lives on, but I think that it is slightly muted.
Are they expecting any kind of protest or any demonstration or anything like that during the song contest? I mean, clearly they've got these countries are boycotting, so they're not attending, but there will still be people who are attending who are outraged that Israel is competing. Are you seeing particularly like a heightening of security, or are there concerns that some of the performers might make political statements? What's the feeling about that?
Is that even allowed? Is the other question. Do they control what songs you sing and stuff?
Oh, they very much control what songs you sing, and they control whether you have, you're not allowed to have a Palestinian flag in your anywhere shown or anything like that. They're very tight on the control of dissent, and this really came to the fore in 2024, and it's been pretty much sort of clamped down on now. The only protest you're going to get is people will be booing the Israeli entrant when he sings his song.
And I wonder if this is symptomatic of a broader conversation in Europe as a whole around our relationship with Israel. So is outside of the actual participating nations and maybe the sort of political commentators, is this causing much disturbance around the actual hardcore fans of Eurovision, or is it just a discussion that's happening in the political realm and actually the sort of core fan base of Eurovision have moved on and aren't that bothered?
No, I think it depends is the answer to that. Some Eurovision fans are very, very upset by this. I know someone who goes every year, is not going this year, writes about it, isn't covering it at all, and they're saying, I'm just going to find a new enthusiasm in my life. A lot of other people are just turning up and partying. So it does depends on the individual, but certainly there are a significant number of people who love the contest and are hardcore fans who are very upset by this.
Sorry, if I might.
Yeah, go for it.
Was the same sort of noise around when Russia was banned, or did that just happen very smoothly?
It happened very smoothly and very quickly. But of course, you could argue that Russia should have been banned in 2014 when it invaded Crimea. And in fact, there were a lot of protests against Russia in the intervening years from 2014 to 2022.
Or even when they invaded Georgia.
That was also tied in with Russia's appalling attitude to gay rights and things like that. So it wasn't just about Crimea.
Eurovision isn't a stranger to politics, is it? I mean, some people say some of the voting actually, when countries vote on each other's songs, is quite political. Is that why Britain always does quite badly? Is there a kind of slight dislike of us ever since we sort of said to the rest of Europe, no thanks, we'll go it alone?
No, well, sadly, our underperformance goes back a long way before that.
Oh, okay. We're just bad.
Yeah, no. So, I mean, if you go back to the 1970s, we absolutely ruled Europe, and we put in fantastic popular artists like Lulu and Sandy Shaw, Cliff Richards, the people like that, really very strong acts. and they did very well. But we sort of fell off a cliff in 1978, and we started entering sort of made for Eurovision bands. One of them worked, Bucks Fizz, and then of course
Bucks
we had
Fizz.
the wonderful Katrina in 1997. But by and large, we've not sent in great acts until Sam Ryder came along.
Yes, of course. Yes, Sam
So
Ryder.
I don't actually watch Eurovision, I have to confess. I've always thought that the songs were gimmicks for everyone. Is that not the case? Is it just us that send kind of really quirky? Because we sent Jedward, didn't we? Or we sent those? No, we didn't.
Oh no, no! Lots of people send in quirky songs. But I think the thing about Eurovision is some people just say it's a sort of festival of vulgarity, but it's actually a wonderful range of songs. And there are some serious songs. There's some slightly silly songs. There's some dance songs. There's a lot of, perhaps a little less now than there used to be. There was a wonderful time when the Balkan countries entered beautiful Balkan ballads. And the French recently have gone back to their roots, and they have things very influenced by people like Piaf and such like. So it is a real festival of different types of music. Some of it is absurd and over the top, and others is more musically serious. But I think that's the whole point of the contest. It's a mixed bag.
I have to say, I ended up watching it last year and I actually really enjoyed it. I found it very touching. I just want to ask you, Chris, before you go, what do you make of our entry this year? Do you think we might have a slightly better chance?
Well, I guess I'm showing my age here, as you guys are a lot younger than me, and you seem to enjoy it. I thought it was not very good, let's say.
I don't think I'd put it on and listen to it, but I quite enjoyed it for what it was. Is that a fair characterisation? It felt Eurovision-y.
It's no, but the point is, I think what's wrong is when people are saying, "Oh, it's a Eurovision song," they've already missed the point. Sam Ryder was a good song with a fantastic singer. Usually, the songs that win are actually just good songs. So
this aims.
I think we've gone down this route of saying, "Oh, we'll do something specifically Eurovision," and I think that's a mistake. But who knows? We don't know. We'll find out on Saturday.
Chris, thank you so much for joining us. We'll be thinking of you on Saturday when the results come in. That was Chris West, author of Eurovision, A History of Modern Europe Through the World's Greatest Song Contest. Sorry to cut you off there, Ali, but I wanted to just wrap up with you on this, because I have to say I wasn't really a Eurovision person. I always, like, from the outside, thought it was a bit silly, and I watched it and I genuinely found it very moving.
Oh, really? Okay.
And at a time where, and I'm going to sound like a bit like I'm on my soapbox now, but at a time when Europe felt very divided, and especially we as Brits, sort of did turn our back on our European neighbours. Watching all these young people, and it is kind of it's become a bit of a queer space. It's become very kind of forgiving and open, and I think that's why this Israel thing really rocks it, because ultimately it is, as Chris was saying, it was about connecting Europe after such a huge period of trauma.
And you always want these spaces. I think about this with the football, right? You always want these spaces to be kind of safe spaces that you can go enjoy yourself, bring people together, that you don't have to, because we have so much. Yeah, we don't have to think about that, and that's what's really sad about these sorts of things happen when Israel and Russia and stuff happens, either here or in FIFA. Is it feels like those spaces are no longer that sort of safe place that you can go and just enjoy your connection with other people, enjoy your love of music or football or whatever it is, without these very, very tough things also ironically invading those spaces as well.
Absolutely.
Are you going to watch this here? I'm boycotting.
No, I'm not, because do you know why, Ali? I'm celebrating my 30th birthday.
I was going to say, I'm going to say happy birthday in the end.
I'm actually not going to. So when we speak next week, I'll be 30.
Yeah.
That is it from Politics Uncensored today. Join us next Thursday at 5 p.m. when we unwrap the week's political talking points.
You can stay up to date with the show by following at Politics Uncensored UK on social media, where you can find me at Ali Milani Live.
And you can find me at Zoe Grunewald.
Make sure to send Zoe all the birthday messages. If you've missed any of today's show, you can listen back and catch up at fubarradio.com or via the Fubar Radio app.
Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week for another episode of Politics Uncensored.